anthem. Now the East Turkistan national anthem. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for joining us. The reason we gathered here today is to commemorate the 29th anniversary of the Baren Massacre. In the spring of 1990, Baren Township near Kashgar in Chinese-occupied East Turkistan suffered under a reign of communist terror unlike any other. As part of its deadly one-child policy of population control, China's government was forcing women to abort their babies. But the villagers of Baren had enough. They had just seen 250 local women robbed of their babies. So they did something few people rarely risk in communist countries. They went to confront the party. These rural people walked into party headquarters and complained to its officials. The Chinese occupation forces responded by flooding Baren Township with People's Liberation Army soldiers, and they began a massive massacre of innocent civilians. According to different sources, anywhere from dozens to thousands of innocent demonstrators were massacred with heavy weaponry. That is why we're here. We're here to bear witness to this atrocity and to solemnly vow to never rest until the Communist Chinese Party ends its murder reign of terror against innocent people, both preborn babies and adults alike, and removes its illegitimate occupation forces from our homeland. Currently, China has at least 3 million people arbitrarily detained in concentration camps. Their only crimes being themselves, believing in God, yearning to be free and independent. Right now, about 1 block to our southwest, the Chinese trade delegation is meeting with United States Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer. We again call on the United States government to cease its negotiations with China's Communist Party. Any trade deal will amount to appeasement and collaboration with a human rights violating regime. This will be a stain on our American national character. I have a story too. Since I began my work in exposing these atrocities, China's occupation forces and the regime has relentlessly targeted my family. Upwards of over 100 members of my immediate and extended family have been imprisoned. And several members of my family have been murdered. Just a month ago, my cousin was tortured to death. I'm here on behalf of every East Turkistani suffering under China's occupation of East Turkistan. I'm here to bear witness and to represent every aborted child, every grieving mother, every broken-hearted father. I'm here to bear witness to the suffering of our people and to tell the Chinese regime that we will not relent. We will not be broken. We will not go quietly into the good night. You may imprison our bodies, you may try to brainwash our minds, but you will not destroy our spirits. You will never extinguish this fire in our hearts. Thus, I'd like to ask everyone here to take a moment of silence to pray for the millions of people that are currently incarcerated in the concentration camps and that are facing forced abortion, sterilization, and other atrocities. Thank you. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Jason Jones, and Jason Jones is the founder of Movie to Movement and a project called the Vulnerable People's Project. He has been very helpful in highlighting the issue of China's oppression in occupied East Turkestan and other countries' oppressive rule in other parts of the world. So I'd like to have him speak for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and especially the press, especially Al Jazeera. I don't know if Al Jazeera is still here, but their heroic coverage has resulted in China banning all Al Jazeera programs and shutting down their websites. There are consequences for standing with the vulnerable. My organization, Movie to Movement, we produce films that tell the truth about the human person, that the human person has an incomparable dignity, beauty, and worth, and that inspires solidarity with the vulnerable. We say we're with the child, from the child in the womb to the Yazidi on Mount Sinjar. When we became aware of the situation in occupied East Turkestan, it was really unbelievable. And we found that as we try to tell people what's going on, they find it hard to believe. The Baren Massacre was so shocking because it began as a massacre of children in the womb. And my journey began 30 years ago this week when I was a soldier in basic training and my high school girlfriend was forced to have an abortion. Then as a soldier deployed, that's where my commitment to serving vulnerable communities began. To think of a massacre taking place to hundreds of women and hundreds of preborn children. The ethnic cleansing in China began in the womb. And it really goes back to the failure of the policies of the 60s, when the mass famine led to the Cultural Revolution, which was to scapegoat the cadre. That failed, So they created a system of terror around controlling women's reproduction and the one-child policy. Now the one-child policy is posing an existential threat to the future of China. So as they look for scapegoats to organize their tyrannical regime, tragically it's the Uyghur. And I don't say this to comfort you. If we're not vigilant, as horrible as it is, it will only become worse. So I want to thank everyone for being here, everyone for standing with the Uyghur, who truly are the most vulnerable people in the world right now. And as Americans, we are the freest, most influential, prosperous people who have ever lived. And I thank all of you for sharing your voice as Americans and not forgetting your families. And we promise you at Movie to Movement that we will stand with you, and as we speak, we're developing a film around the Baren Massacre. So thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you, Jason. Now I'd like to invite Faith McDonald. She's from the Institute on Religion and Democracy.
Hi everybody, I'm honored to be here today with so many wonderful people and organizations that care about the persecuted and vulnerable. Thank you for allowing me to express my solidarity. The Institute on Religion and Democracy, or IRD, is committed to work for freedom from the oppressive, genocidal Chinese communist regime for all people. While a Chinese trade delegation attempts a trade deal inside the White House, we are here outside the White House as a witness to the truth about the Chinese Communist Party. And because of that truth, we urge the Trump administration to halt trade talks until the CCP government halts its violation of human rights. We also ask the United States and other nations to impose strong sanctions, including the Global Magnitsky Act, against officials responsible for these egregious actions towards the people of East Turkistan and elsewhere. The CCP regime is an equal opportunity human rights violator. In 25 years of advocacy, I have heard many heartbreaking stories of the regime's brutal persecution of the people of East Turkestan and Tibet, of Christians and Uyghur Muslims, of pro-democracy activists and Falun Gong practitioners, of women and children, particularly unborn children, and of North Koreans who flee across the border to China. In 2007, my then 10-year-old daughter and I attended the Shenyang Chinese New Year Global Gala. In one ballet, a mother who is a Falun Gong practitioner is beaten and taken away by the soldiers from her child. My daughter turned to me with tears and asked, "Mommy, do they really take mothers from their children?" As much as I hated to add to her sorrow, I had to tell her yes. But, as you well know, they don't just take mothers from their children. They take children from their mothers, literally ripping them from the wombs of their mothers. China's draconian population control through its one-child policy, forced abortions, and forced sterilizations are so brutally enforced that no resistance is tolerated. Today, we observe and mourn the deaths of not only all of the babies murdered by the regime, but on this 29th anniversary, the murder of thousands of men and women in the East Turkistan Baren township that resisted the regime taking their babies. That massacre foreshadowed what was to come. Today, the regime is imprisoning an estimated million or more in concentration camps known as counter-extremism centers. They're holding another 2 million in euphemistically named re-education centers. These are the same camps where Christian house church leaders and members, underground Catholic priests, and others who are enemies of the state are imprisoned. And we've already heard reports that the CCP regime is complicit in the horrific harvesting of organs from Uyghur, Falun Gong, Christians, and other prisoners. And just yesterday, I heard that the reports that the camps are being outfitted with crematoria, calling to mind the horrific ovens of the Nazis. China was complicit in another genocide in the early 2000s. The Chinese National Petroleum Company, under the alias PetroChina, helped the National Islamic Front regime of Sudan to commit genocide against the black African people groups of southern Sudan. Today, the CCP regime is swallowing Africa, offering African nations money, paying bribes, providing financing at outrageous interest, and signing contracts they have no intention of respecting. The great human rights hero Natan Sharansky revealed to the world that when the policy of appeasement stopped, the days of the Soviet Union were numbered. IRD urges the United States government to fully reject appeasement of China. Appeasement enables murderous CCP thugs to harass, arrest, imprison, persecute, torture, and kill. Appeasement enables the Chinese government to defy universal human rights covenants, to practice forced abortion, and to forcibly repatriate desperate North Korean refugees to almost certain death. IRD is grateful for U.S. government voices like those of Ambassador at Large for Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback, and some members of Congress who have fought against persecution in China. We urge the Trump administration and Congress to continue and to always link human rights with trade, security, and every other relationship we have with the CCP regime. And finally, I cannot end without calling out those who put dollars above humanity, the lobbyists for the Chinese Communist Party. Do not let the international law and lobbying firm Squire Patton Boggs off the hook. The partners and attorneys of Squire Patton Boggs, some of them who are former members of Congress, should be ashamed of themselves for taking as clients regimes that commit genocide. And they should be put to shame by all of us here and by all those who care about human rights in East Turkestan and China. The IRD will continue to do everything in our power to call attention to the Chinese regime's persecution of men, women, children, and unborn babies, and to condemn appeasement with the persecutors. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kyle. I'm the Director of Operations for the East Turkistan National Awakening Movement. I want to thank Faith for that powerful speech, and also thank Jason for all of his help, and of course thank all of you for showing up today. Next, we're going to be having Michelle Hendrickson with Students for Life.
Well, thank you all for having me. It is an honor to stand here with you all. Good afternoon. If you were to have asked me last week the significance of April 5th, I wouldn't have really had an answer. It took my team at Students for Life and Jason Jones sharing the horrors of the Baren Massacre for me to know the truth. The reality that 29 years ago, 250 children, probably more, were ripped from their mother's womb from forced abortions in China. That fathers mourn the loss of their long-awaited baby boy or girl. That families were destroyed in a calculated and malicious genocide of the people in East Turkestan. And America was silent. In 1990, my world consisted of strawberry shortcake and mud pies. But on the other side of the world, children my age were watching as their mothers were taken away, and that sibling that they were waiting for never came home. I started sharing this story with friends and family, and no one recalled hearing about this in the 90s. Even when survivors started speaking out, it was never truly covered in the media. So today we stand together to say that we will not spend another year staying silent on this massacre. Today and every April 5th after, we stand together to commemorate the lives lost and to be a voice for those who lost theirs. At Students for Life of America, we work with over 1,200 college and high school groups across the country, and we proudly call this the pro-life generation. Our students come from a range of religions and races and backgrounds, but there is one thing they all have in common. They understand that abortion is archaic. Abortion is the violent act that intentionally takes the life of an innocent human being who has intrinsic value. And what happened in the township of Baren shows the true nature of abortion and what happens when a society stops valuing life. We must progress beyond this violence, and we can start by facing the truth of what happened and speaking out against it. We condemn the horror that the Chinese government forced upon these families in East Turkistan. We condemn the blatant genocide of the Muslim people there. And we call on this pro-life generation to rise up, to be a voice for the vulnerable, and to build a society that protects life. Thank you all.
Thank you, Michelle. That was great. Next, we're going to have Destiny Della Rosa. She is the founder of New Wave Feminist.
Thank you so much. So the irony is not lost on me that I am an agnostic at a rally for religious freedom, standing up for people to be able to practice whatever it is they believe in. And I think it puts me in a unique position because it's made very clear to me the hypocrisy that I'm seeing. I am surrounded by many people of faith, yet I've just recently learned about the struggles that the Uyghurs have been facing in the last few months. I wonder why there's this silence here, why it's not being spoken out about. I think, unfortunately, it is because these are people of a Muslim faith. And while this time the persecution is happening to Muslims, next time, again, it will be Christians, it will be Jews, it will be other people of faith. And that's why at this moment, it is vital that everyone come together and understand the attack on human dignity. And it goes beyond just the womb, the camps, the things that are happening. We are seeing an attack on fertility. I spent the last couple weeks at the UN, listening to UN leaders praising communist China for how they are doing such a great job with data collection. That is something that should horrify every single one of us here. The fact that this data is being used then to persecute marginalized groups and other groups. It is being used to perpetuate violence against them, against their children. And I will say, even as an agnostic, I do believe in a higher power. And I believe in a higher power. The reason I'm not full-blown atheist is because my own children, being able to experience the connection that I have with my own children, there is power in that. There is power in this connection with another human being that is so selfless, that is full of unconditional love. And if I wanted to take God away from somebody, the first thing I would do is I would attack their fertility. I would attack the natural bond that they have as a creator themselves to create these other human beings. So the fact that they see that as such a threat, and do not be fooled, that is what it is. It is a threat. The family is a threat. Because when you don't have family, when you don't have God, when you don't have a higher power of some kind, the government can come in and become that for you. And so if we acknowledge that the family is a threat, that faith is a threat, that the government wants to become our God so that it has that power, all of this makes so much more sense. We start seeing why it is that these people are being segregated and pulled into these camps and re-educated and indoctrinated to a belief. We were joking earlier that there's an evil villain somewhere that's like, make the winds come and ruin our demonstration. But the beauty in this is that America does have power. We have something that communist China wants. They want to be able to trade with us. They want the prosperity of that relationship. That is privilege. And we have to make sure that we are leveraging that privilege to stand up for the vulnerable. Last election cycle, Donald Trump, he made one particular word very popular, very notorious. And I have to say that when that word started coming into the vernacular, became a normal thing, I had to start looking around and realizing the only pussy I see is the person in the White House who is going to put profit over people, who is going to allow a government to trade with people who are massacring and mutilating their own children. I'm glad I ran off the Trump supporters. The fact that we are not using this privilege and this power to protect the vulnerable is an abomination, and that is absolutely not something that America should stand for.
having Yvonne Florzak Seaman. She is the founder of Love from Above, which is a pro-women group. And so we'll let her speak, and then we may have one more person.
Thank you so much for having me here today, and thank you so much for the courage it took for everyone to come together from so many different walks of life, from so many different backgrounds. But we're coming together because we understand that when all is said and done, we are people, we are human beings, and we are worthy of dignity. I have always believed that there are two types of evil: those who do evil and those who do nothing to stop it. I have accepted this invitation to come and join this extremely diversified group of organizations for two reasons. My first and foremost is to expose China's genocide of 250 Uyghur pregnant women from East Turkistan by forcing them into forced abortions and then brutally beating them, raping them, and murdering them. Their only crime was their desire to be mothers. That was their only crime, was wanting to be mothers. My second reason to be here today is to share my personal testimony of my forced abortions that took place in this great nation of the free. And it is to expose that freedom of choice is not freedom when it is forced upon you. Abortion hurts women emotionally, physically, psychologically, and spiritually. And it carries a lifetime of consequences. It carries guilt and shame and sadness and drugs and alcohol and depression. And for those of us who have experienced abortion firsthand, we know personally the pain that comes with the agonizing reality that we have been left alone, with the agonizing reality that we now have to make a choice, and that decision is abortion. So we know that these 250 women must have been horrified because their choice was never validated. Their choice was never given. These 250 women were ripped apart from their families because they were pregnant, because their only desire was to be a mother. That was their crime, because they were going to continue to increase the population of the Uyghurs. Imagine that. What world are we living in that we have come to a point that we get to pick and choose who will live and who will not live? We were all created in God's image. We were all created with gifts and talents. We were all created to bring into this world something special. And China or no one has the right to take that away from any one of us, especially mothers, whose only crime is to want to be mothers. It is time for women to take back their power and to be the voice for our Muslim sisters through sisterhood, motherhood, and womanhood. The season of time has come for women to unite and to fight for justice. We no longer can be on opposite ends. Destiny and I are as far as the east and from the west, but I adore her. I adore her opinions. I adore her statements because she is who she is. She is my sister. Women need to come together, and we are coming together to take back our power. Enough is enough. We have been shitted on long enough. It is our time to find our voices so that we can be the voices for those 250 women that are in the grave. So that they will know that their outcry from the grave has been heard. It is time for us to come together. And we are standing here before this White House in this great country of the freedom. And we are urging this administration along with our First Lady to come together with us and stand with us as women. And don't allow China to continue the genocide among these beautiful people. We are Christians, we are agnostics, we are atheists, we are Muslims. It doesn't matter. We all are under one great being. And one day we will all stand before that great being, and what will we say? What did we do with the life that we were given? Did we fight for those who could not fight for themselves? Did we speak for those who had no voice? We have voices. Let us come together and unite. And for those of you that are here that don't understand the atrocity of what happened to these 250 women through these forced abortions, I am here and I challenge you today to go see that movie Unplanned, who explains in great detail what abortion means. Go see that movie and you will understand the evil that has come up against them and women who have been forced to have abortions. It is time for us to speak. The Me Too movement had to be birthed so that the despicable acts of the boys' club could be exposed. It is now time to speak. It's time for us to come together. I look forward to working with Destiny and to working with all of those that appeared here today. No matter where you come from, we are one under God. Thank you so much for listening, and God bless you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Sanction China!
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 Boycott China!
Boycott China!
Boycott China!
Boycott China!
Boycott China!
Boycott China!
No trade deal!
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 America, stand up against China! America, stand up against China!
America, stand up against China!
President Trump, 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 stand up against China!
America, stand up against genocide!
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 President Trump, 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 stand up against genocide!
China shut down the concentration camps!
China shut down the concentration camp!
China shut down the concentration camps!
China shut down the concentration camp!
China stop the genocide!
China stop the genocide!
China stop the genocide!
China stop the genocide!
China end the occupation!
China end occupation!
China end the occupation!
China end occupation!
China get out of East Turkistan!
China get out of East Turkistan!
China get out of East Turkistan!
China get out of East Turkistan.
Independence for East Turkestan!
Independence for East Turkistan.
Independence for East Turkestan!
Independence for East Turkistan.
America sanction China!
America sanction China. America sanction China.
America sanction China!
America sanction China.
America sanction China!
America sanction China.
President Trump sanction China!
President Trump sanction China.
President Trump sanction China!
President Trump sanction China.
America boycott China!
America boycott China.
America boycott China!
America boycott China.
President Trump boycott China!
President Trump boycott China.
President Trump boycott China!
President Trump boycott China.
America no trade with China!
America not trade with China.
America don't trade with China!
America don't trade with China.
President Trump don't trade with China!
President Trump don't trade with China.
President Trump don't trade with China!
President Trump don't trade with China.
China stop the genocide!
China stop the genocide.
China stop the genocide! China stop the genocide! China shut down the concentration camps!
China shut down the concentration camp.
China shut down the concentration camps!
China shut down the concentration camp.
China in the occupation!
China in the occupation.
China in the occupation!
China in the occupation.
China get out of East Turkestan!
China get out of East Turkistan.
China get out of East Turkestan!
China get out of East Turkistan.
Independence for East Turkestan!
Independence for East Turkistan.
Independence for East Turkestan!
Independence for East Turkistan.
America stand up against China!
America stand up against China.
America stand up against China!
America stand up against China.
President Trump stand up against China!
President Trump stand up against China.
President Trump stand up against China!
President Trump stand up against China.
America stand up against genocide!
America stand up against genocide.
America stand up against genocide!
America stand up against genocide.
President Trump stand up against genocide!
President Trump stand up against genocide.
President Trump stand up against genocide!
President Trump stand up against genocide.
America sanction China!
America sanction China.
America sanction China!
America sanction China.
President Trump sanction China!
President Trump sanction China.
President Trump sanction China!
President Trump sanction China.
America boycott China!
America boycott China.
America boycott China!
America boycott China.
President Trump boycott China!
President Trump boycott China.
President Trump boycott China!
President Trump boycott China.
China stop the genocide!
China stop the genocide.
China stop the genocide!
China stop the genocide.
China shut down the concentration camps!
China shut down the concentration camp.
China shut down the concentration camps!
China shut down the concentration camp.
China in the occupation!
China in the occupation.
China in the occupation!
China in the occupation.
China get out of East Turkestan!
China get out of East Turkistan.
China get out of East Turkestan!
China get out of East Turkistan.
Independence for East Turkestan!
Independence for East Turkistan. Independence for East Turkistan!
Independence for the Uyghurs!
Independence for the Uyghur!
Independence for the Uyghurs!
Independence for the Uyghur!
America, sanction China!
America, sanction China!
America, sanction China!
America, sanction China!
You know, my name's Katie, I'm from Austin, Texas, and I'm struck by the fact right now we have students standing right here behind me in purple, getting their pictures taken. Hi, I'm so glad you're here, and I want this not just to be some little trite experience. Hey, we went by the White House and oh my gosh, there was like totally a protest. These are a group of people, a clan of people from the continent of Asia, so geography lesson, who are not viewed as human beings. These are real people, the Uyghur people. I want you to know right now, you are so privileged to be in this place right now, free to wear a USA sweatshirt, free to think the way you want to think, free to grow up, to get married, to have children without fear. The people standing here before you have not had that freedom. Hundreds of family members are missing, gone. Imagine your mother, your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle disappearing and you don't know if he or she is dead or alive. So please, no, especially if you consider yourself pro-life, especially if you use that label pro-life, life doesn't begin and end in the womb. All life is precious, no matter your skin color, the type of clothes you wear, the flag you fly. Please, while you're here in Washington, D.C., please take the time to talk to people. Every single person here. Right before I came, someone said to me, Katie, why are you going to Washington, D.C.? What story do you have to tell? What do you know about the Uyghur people? You have no voice to share. Wrong. I'm here, I'm cold, and I'm standing alongside new friends, fellow humans. And I don't have to be afraid of what's going to happen to my family. I don't have to be afraid of what's going to happen to my children. I don't have to be afraid of what's going to happen to me. So I want every person here who's standing on the periphery, I want you to know what leads to human rights violations is indifference. Do not walk away from this experience today and forget what you've seen. Do not choose to say, oh, they live over there. Oh, they look different than me. Their national anthem is different than mine. Their flag is different than mine. Do not choose the route of indifference. Recognize the humanity. Recognize whatever point of commonality you have and hold on to that and be willing to fight for it. I don't know what that's going to look like for you. For me, it's speaking up softly and saying, may I please say something? And that's what I'm going to do. And so thank you to everyone who has spoken. And for those of you who are standing, taking video, do that. Go back and rewatch the video. Share it and recognize we have a serious problem here. It's bigger than abortion. Abortion is a symptom of dehumanization. Do not succumb to the lie. Do not succumb to the othering. Any student of history knows how this ends. Do not allow the Uyghur people to be wiped out from the history books. Don't allow that. They are here, they are people, and we have to fight for them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Wonderful speech. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming here today, taking your precious time. Thank you for coming all the way from Austin, Texas to join us here. Thank you for coming all the way from Dallas, Texas to join us here. And We had Jason, who came all the way from Hawaii to join us here today. And we had Yvonne, who came all the way from Chicago to join us here today. So I want to thank everybody that took their time to stand here with us in solidarity, to send a message to the world that we are not going to stand silent to oppression, whether it happens in East Turkestan or whether it happens in Syria or any other parts of the world, or even here in the United States. Thank you all.
Tamam. Çektin mi?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Moldy, 1 liter.